Thanks, Justin, and thanks, everybody. It's great to be in Wisconsin. It's great to be at a GIS show with a full room of interested people, and it was really great to be on the program after hearing this morning's talk from Scott and also Secretary Steph. And I'm not going to just talk about open data and open source, but what I really want to talk about is what's going on in our industry. And it's, I've been in this business for 25 years and have never been more interested or excited about what's going on. There's so much new, there's so many opportunities out there. And one of the big things is what we heard about this morning. We had two great speakers, senior people, political officials, talking about GIS without using the word GIS. They're talking about what people do with the data that all of us create and work with every day. Geospatial is going much more mainstream, but it's different. There's a lot of new things at play, and it's both invigorating and can be a little bit scary. But there's also some real reasons to look at the new technologies and embrace them. Some things are easier than ever, and many things are less costly than ever before. And it's not just geospatial. The whole world is changing, and especially the information technology landscape. And really, there's no one better to talk about change than Bob Dylan. But the words of that really ring true just across our economy, across our society, and across information technology. Things always change. And this was driven home for me for another reason. I was putting together a timeline of our company. We've been around for 23 years. And just thinking about how much technology has changed in that 23 years. I mean, I grew up, learned ArcInfo version 3.2 on a Prime mini computer. And having Unix workstations that only cost $30,000 in the late 1980s was an amazing piece of progress. And command line, and then this thing, the internet popped up. And then companies like Google popped up, and Esri's now got something that runs on an actual PC. And oh gosh, we have to have a website. How do we make our website? How do we keep it fresh? And then the web exploded, and then the web bombed with the economy in 2001, the dot-bomb era. And then things started coming back in the mid-2000s, and the iPod came out, and the iTunes Store, and more different browsers, IE and Firefox. And change just continues to churn and churn and churn. The website we built looked better than ever. Started being able to mix and match technologies, do things like Google mashups. And then the economy came again. And then out of the ashes of this economy is a whole new wave of innovation driven by our telephones and mobile devices and tablets. And company has a smartphone plan, and we've just gotten rid of Outlook, email, and moved our entire company to Gmail, as has the state of Utah and the U.S. Department of Interior. Just huge amounts of opportunity. And the point is not really what we've done, but that change is inevitable in our space, and it's something that's worth paying attention to. And there's in my opinion, a huge payback to be gained from understanding some of the things that are going on. And we also feel this change in our personal lives. The computers we have at home, the devices we have at home, how important web access is to us and our kids. How important it is to have easy-to-use software, where you don't use it at home. How you get software. I mean, we all remember installing it from DVDs. I mean, I remember when you got 2 floppy disks. Now you just download it from the web or download itself automatically. These are things we all feel and experience, both at work and in our personal lives. And at work, it's, again, planning for change, whether it's how you buy that new server or get that new email system. And again, the phone, I think, is a really good window into that. Thoughts occurred to more people than me that, we have our tricorders. Basically, the only thing this doesn't do is the medicine from bones. We can watch TV, we can take video, we can do our email, we have a Rolodex, we have a camera, we can talk on phone. I can time my presentation so I don't go over. And the fact that these things are so powerful and ubiquitous is changing the geospatial landscape. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. So there's these immense macro technology shifts that are going on. And we're feeling them at the edges in our business, the geospatial business, but it's the cloud and mobile computing. And the thing that really ties it all together is fast internet everywhere, wireless or with wire. There is no cloud if you can't get to the cloud with the internet. There is no mobile unless you can get to the network where the applications and the data are. And these are game changers, absolute game changers. And again, you hear it if you just read the business pages of the newspaper. And there's been a number of commentators who've said things like there are really 5 technology companies that matter. Facebook, Google, Apple, Amazon, and Microsoft. And you think the list could be 8 or 9, IBM and Oracle, never count them out. But what differentiates these companies? They have their own clouds. They have the resources and the head start to build these massive, massive data centers that do drive the internet right now. And oh, by the way, Apple and Google and Microsoft have 3 very powerful geospatial platforms that are available through their clouds. Just to give you a sense of what's involved with this is Google is the 4th or 5th biggest server manufacturer on the planet. They have one customer, Google. They make all their own servers for their data centers, and their data centers are growing and have that many servers that they're the 4th biggest supplier in the world. And so, how is GIS changing? One thing is its name. And again, Wisconsin has the Wisconsin Land Information Association, so GIS isn't baked into your name. But people are rethinking that. Paul Ramsey is a great speaker. If you ever get a chance to see him, I first saw him speak at the Minnesota GIS LIS conference a few years back, made the observation at the Foster-G conference a couple of years ago is like, is GIS an industry? I thought it was just a kind of software. And then if you look at the software, it's thick, desktop, complicated software, really what many of us are doing on a day-to-day basis. And I think it's true, and I think if you read around, you're starting to see more and more terms that cover what we do. Geospatial, spatial information technology, and I think it's entirely appropriate. And again, some of what, did Scott Resnick say the term GIS once this morning, as he showed us 10 very interesting mapping applications? GIS is a part of this broader geospatial, spatial IT planet. And again, whether it's Foursquare, or Zillow, or Flickr, or getting directions on your telephone, or whatever the case may be, those are part of the same industry we're in. And again, GIS is a piece of it, but it's not the whole thing. And it's important for us to understand the broader ecosystem we inhabit. So what I'm going to do for the next half hour or so is drill into a few more details on these big trends, the cloud, mobile, some opportunities with open source and data, and then sort of end with the conclusion I've come to, which is it's a best-of-breed world, and walk you through a project that we recently deployed that I think immensely benefited from that outlook. So, the cloud matters. We talked about that already, but it's not homogeneous. It's important to understand what the cloud is and whose cloud you're on and all of those things. And the difference between infrastructure as a service, the notion of renting a virtual machine in someone's cloud like Amazon, or platform as a service using something like ArcGIS Online, which has lots of tools, so if you move your data there, you can manipulate your data on their platform. And then there's software as a service, whether it's in a commercial space, something like Salesforce.com, like a customer relationship management system, Or even something like Sugarfly. You move your pictures up there, and you can make these, a Christmas card or a photo album. You don't have to install any software. You just go to a website and you can do what you want to do. So it's not an easy thing to fully understand, but pay attention. For us, small company in Boston, the infrastructure as a service stuff has been unbelievably important and transformative. Hardware is a hassle. It's expensive. It breaks. It needs to be air conditioned. All of those kinds of things. So, 4 years ago now, when we heard about Amazon, like, we can outsource our data center. We can rent computing and storage. We can grow it as we need it. Geez, if it works, we're in. And not only did it work, it exceeded all expectations. And what started as 4 years ago with 1 or 2 servers is now 25 servers in a virtual private cloud in Amazon. And it's a completely different cost model. So instead of periodically investing in hardware as a capital cost, now it's a predictable monthly cost. We pay $2,000 or $3,000 a month to Amazon for our 25 servers. And if we need a bigger one, we shut the little one down and spin up a big one. And this is literally a screenshot from our Amazon bill, and you're charged by the hour. If it's Linux, it's 3 cents an hour, and if it's Windows, it's 5 cents an hour. If it's small, it's 5 cents an hour. If it's big, it's 20 cents an hour. It's on demand. And if you have a development machine and you want to turn it off at night, you're not paying for it while it's off. So it's really attractive and it works really well. And the math works. So this was a while ago when we had I think 15 or 16 servers up there, and our cost was about $2,000 a month. And I had our system administrator cost out what it would cost to buy that part, and it came out to about $102,000. Which again, hardware wears out or gets slow, and you have to replace it every 3 or 4 years. So if you sort of $2,000 a month, $24,000 a year times 4 years, $96,000. So the cost is a little bit lower, which is good. But as we got into it, it's not about the cost. We would pay more right now to have access to Amazon services because it's their air conditioning and their internet. It's not just the cost of equipment, it's running the equipment has operational costs. And all those things break. It's their commitment to keep it online. It's way more reliable than we ever could. Not 100%, no 100%, but very, very strong. Scalability. If I have something that's getting slow and I need a new server, you have it in minutes. Best case scenario, I order it online, I have it shipped one day, I install it in the rack. It's 3 days to a week under the best circumstances. And so the ability to have it on demand is hugely powerful. And flexibility. If you buy a server that's too small, you're stuck. If you provision a virtual server that's too small, you shut it down and make a bigger one. Yeah, you're paying a little more per hour, but you're not stuck with something that's not meeting your needs. These things are really, really important, and whether you're government or business, give you incredible amounts of desirable flexibility. So mobile, the devices are here. You can see them out here. I brought my own few devices with me to Wisconsin. The networks are improving. 3G is becoming 4G. The 4G is more often showing up on your phone with what's being accessed. And people want it, whether it's your kids or business people. And that's not me making this up. This is year-old data already from the Pew Research Center. 87% of Americans own a cell phone. 45% of Americans at that time had a smartphone. And 31% of the people who had a smartphone, it was their primary way of accessing the internet. And I ride the commuter rail in Boston, and it's been fascinating over the last 5 years watching how the devices have proliferated and changed. Started seeing people read books on Kindle. Then you started seeing people listening to music and browsing on smartphone, or at least iPhone. Then you started seeing the iPad. And now you're seeing more different kind of tablets. And you walk down the aisle, and someday I'll count or take a picture, but it's 80 to 90% of the people are using a mobile device, and somehow the internet is a part of it. And so what does that mean for us? It means we have to be able to get our data, our applications to the devices people are using. Otherwise, we're missing an opportunity. And I saw this play out just last month. We're embarking on a project in Stockton, California, a planning project. And we did a survey of the GIS users in the city. And one of the things we asked, question number 27, I would like improved access to the city's GIS resources on my phone and other mobile devices. Yeah, there are inspectors, there are people who work at remote offices away from City Hall. And over 50% of the people agreed or strongly agreed with that phrase. So in city government in 2014, there is demand to get the tools onto the devices people use. Switching over to open source software. Way back in 2011, Directions magazine, if you haven't encountered it, it's worth looking up. Great commentary on our industry from both Dina Schutzberg and Joe Fonseca. They did a podcast which basically sort of said, are Esri and open source the leading alternatives for geospatial at this time? And it was an interesting question, and the conclusion was, open source really is the second opportunity right now, the second most deployed, second most widely used. As I'll discuss a little later, there are more and more opportunities now, but it's for real. And back in 2011, it was mostly talking about server sites, GeoServer, map server, PostGIS. But now the desktop stuff has kicked in a big way. And QGIS is being I was having a drink last night at the bar, and I heard people talking about the QGIS workshop and saying it was great. These things are a real alternative and we're worth understanding. And there is this business ecosystem around it. It's not the geeks and the IT people who are open source fanatics anymore. Business and government are users. And part of that is there are companies that are supporting the open source tools. They're picking a set of open source tools and they're providing support, technical support that gives you insurance and assurance if you make a commitment to them. I think we've all heard of Red Hat Linux, a company, $1 billion company now that supplies installed packages and maintenance on an open source operating system. And there's a company called OpenGeo. They just rebranded themselves about 6 months ago as Boundless. That's doing the exact same thing on PostGIS, GeoServer, and QGIS, and they picked some open source tools. And it helps. There's help if you need it. You can get support if you want. So, the bottom line is it's not this abstract concept, whether it's my company or the FCC or NASA or the Department of Defense or several states. Open source is being deployed operationally. Open source is out there working. The software is ever maturing and getting more powerful, both on the server and desktop. And one of the main things is its affordable scalability. If you want to have, instead of one server, one map server, you want to have a cluster of 2 map servers, you don't have to buy the second license for the second server. And it gives you a great deal of flexibility. And as I'll talk about further, it's a really important tool to mix and match with commercial and other cloud-based geospatial tools that are out there. So open data, I'm a little sheepish even talking about it after hearing Scott Resnick talk about it. And he didn't talk about it, he just showed it. And he showed why it matters and how it's making a difference in Madison and Chicago, New York City, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But it's worth looking at. The USA has a history of free and open public records. I was talking to Ron Wenzel. It's not new. USGS used to sell USGS quad sheet film separates for the cost of duplication. And there are a lot of people who made a lot of money making maps based on USGS's old hard copy topo data. You want contours on your map, just buy the separate. So not the same around the world. I did a project in Canada a couple of years ago where they don't have open data, and it was a real barrier. But they're catching up. Both Britain and Canada are doing a lot of opening up the data, even though it's not the law of the land, as it is here. The other thing is the data exists. The taxpayers have already paid for it. So why not put those data to work in as many ways as possible? And again, that's what Scott was, that was his main point. Put it out there, people will find it and do interesting things with it. Some of those things help your city. The other thing is, if your data is not open and you have to charge for it, that's not free money. It costs money to bill people, to collect people, to have products and do all of those things. We'll talk about that in a minute. But the other thing is, there are these broad economic benefits, and that's what, I think Scott did such a good job of talking about, is, those benefits accrue both to the geospatial community, people like us, but also to the broader economy. And, this piece has gotten a lot of people's attention. McKinsey and Company is one of these big, fancy consulting firms out of New York City. This isn't, open source activists or open data activists. This is big business looking at open data and estimating that there's a potential $3 trillion a year of value that's opened up with open data. Helping businesses start up, helping companies to segment their markets and bring new products and services, improving the efficiency and effectiveness of operations. This is what people do with that open data, and it helps the economy. And a good economy helps government, and government has the resources to take care of the environment and pick up the trash or whatever, all of the important things that get done. But there's real power in open data. This is a use case from literally last Friday in my office. We had someone in California contact us. They're having terrible drought out there. Contacted us about potentially doing some web mapping of the drought, and they wanted the status of water districts. Which water districts have restrictions in place? Which water districts have a 30-day reserve or a 60-day reserve or whatever? So, we're in Boston. How do you figure that stuff out? So, California has an open data portal. We went, found the California water districts data set. We downloaded it as a shapefile. We used some open source tools available to work with MapQuest and Leaflet, which is an open source JavaScript framework. Someone's built something where you can drag a shapefile into Leaflet and it maps it automatically on top of the base map. And literally within 30 minutes, with zero cost other than labor, no technology other than a browser, we have a snapshot of what the water district data landscape is in California and how well or not that will support this project. So again, from business terms, it's helping bring a project to market quicker. It's helping us give a more accurate price to a potential government customer. And someone made those data. They were just sitting there. Why shouldn't they be available? Why shouldn't they be used for things like this? And then there's the whole charging for data. If you're interested in this blog piece from Brian Timoney, Flawed Economics of Closed Government Data is worth looking at. At a minimum, there are very few cases where selling data is a major revenue stream, like 6 figures even. And in places that have had very high fees, like Orange County, California, eventually someone charges, and eventually it's happened in Connecticut, it's happened in California, a couple other states. The Supreme Court sort of said, no, that's not right, and those fees get overturned. And it really does cost government money to sell stuff. You have to establish the fees, you have to educate and publicize the fees, You have to process and fulfill the orders. You have to collect the money. And it's not insignificant. It takes people's time and attention. So there is a flip side. It's not free money when you're selling the data. There's a cost to it. So what are the open data best practices? I'm using a construct I heard from a guy named Chris Hurwitz, who works for a company called Mapbox. I don't think he invented these ideas, but he articulated them in a very clear way. And essentially what he said is, the best practice is there are three kinds of open data consumers. There's the casual user who may just want a viewer. I want to just see what data is out there. And browse, basic uses. And then there's a programmatic user who wants an API. They want to access the data in real time. That's what's going on when you're looking at the location of buses. That's what's going on when you're looking at the location of snowplows. There's a data feed. There's an API that says this is how you access the data in real time. And then there are people who want to download the data and do their own thing with it. Make crazy maps, buffer it, do analysis, work with the professional grade geospatial tools, etc. And all three of those types of users should be supported, could be supported if you have maximum commitment to open data. And a good example of that is the Federal Communications Commission with the National Broadband Act, where indeed they have a browser. You can view the National Broadband Act, and you just zoom and pan around and change the layers and things like that. But they also have a developer page, and you can't probably read it there, but down here, this list, it's a list of APIs. So if you want to access the National Broadband data, you can consume it off of FCC's servers through these very well-documented APIs. Again, Chris Hurwitz checked this. Yep, API, yep, developer documentation, yep, solid metadata, no interface. Well, they have the browser interface, but it's up to you, and there are lots of people who have repurposed the National Broadband data. And oh yeah, if you want to download the data, there's a page for that too. So, if you're looking for a state example, the state of Utah, the AGRC, has their website supports all three kinds of these data access as well. It's not hard, and there's lots of value to it. Bottom line to me is that government should try to make the data available at the lowest cost possible. Take the staff time out of it. And literally, it's as easy as putting your file on the web somewhere every time it changes. It could be 5 or 10 minutes. Allow free and open download. Use standard formats. The formats that people use are the formats that are easy to convert into other formats. And don't get fussy or fancy about it. Put the whole data set up there as is. Put the whole county there. Put the whole state there. It's the consumer's responsibility to cookie cut it or just pull out tax-exempt properties or commercial properties. If you have the data, put it out there. And again, just from this week, Tuesday, Ramsey County, Minnesota makes their geospatial data that they used to charge for free with absolutely no restrictions. Partly because it's easier to do because they're estimating they would have made $3,000 if they continued with the fees. They're betting that they'll create more than $3,000 of economic activity that will help the county. Scott mentioned GitHub, and GitHub is really interesting. The more technical you are, the more interesting it becomes. But there are some really interesting tools for helping in data distribution. These maps here are the city of Cambridge's address data. And literally, if you create a GitHub account and upload a GeoJSON file to GitHub, it automatically maps. You get these maps by just having the file there. It's smart enough to know it's a geospatial file, and it assumes if it's a geospatial file, you want to see a base map under it, you use Mapbox as base maps, and it's there. And if people want to download it, you can enable them to do that. Give them a link to GitHub. It's done. You can download Cambridge's citywide address data from GitHub. GitHub also has paid access. If you're doing open source, it's free, but we actually have a corporate subscription. We do all of our source code control in GitHub. Very, very fine tools and security if you're paying. And now they're doing things, the whole thing with source code is, what's the difference? Okay, if I checked in this piece of code, how is it different? This notion of the diff command to see the changes in code. Well, they're doing it now with geospatial data. Again, GitHub tools, so if you put a new GeoJSON file up, it'll show you the difference between the previous one. This is a change in a Chicago political district. So really interesting stuff going on. There are new choices in the geospatial marketplace all over. There's new offerings from new suppliers, companies I'd never heard of until the last year or two, Fulcrum, CartoDB, GIS Cloud. And as we all know, there's new offerings from existing suppliers. ArcGIS Online is relatively new. It's a big change to go from your own self-provisioned ArcGIS server and desktop into ArcGIS Online. It gives you a moment to sort of say, well, let me check out their cloud. Or if I want to go to the cloud, maybe I like someone else's cloud better. Same with Google. They've had a bunch of free tools for a while. They're now opening up their cloud to enterprise applications. You can get a subscription. You can put your data in Google's cloud, publish it with their familiar user interface and their fabulous geocode. So again, nothing's a no-brainer anymore. There's choice. Let's go shopping. Let's check it out. There's some good stuff. And the change doesn't have to be drastic. You don't have to chop down the tree and replace it. You can poke around the edges, experiment. And the analogy I use is like you plant a seed, you nurture a bud, and you may stay with your legacy system, but you see how the new thing works out. And if you like it, you give it more water and fertilizer. If you don't like it, you learn something. And that's what makes it fun. We're all at this conference. We like to learn new stuff. There's a lot of new things to be learned with the tools that are out there. And some of those tools have been developed in this world of mobile and cloud. One of the things that people like about Google, it works on your phone, it works on your tablet, it works on your desktop, it works on my Mac. That's the ecosystem they've grown up in. And for some of the problems we're trying to solve, the new approaches are more in tune with the new technology landscape. Which leads to best of breed. I have a dog, I like dogs. But where does the term best of breed come from? It comes from, there are different breeds of dogs, and at dog shows, the winner is the best of breed. And, dogs were bred for different purposes, to herd sheep, or Labradors originally were pulling fishing nets up in Canada. Jack Russells, keep the rats out of the castles, et cetera, et cetera. And, we all live the best of breed in our real world lives. We choose the tools, the cars, whatever that we like best, that are suited to what we have to do. And it's up to us to decide what's the best cost and value. And yeah, some people just have Cadillacs and they have 3 Cadillacs. I have 3 kids, so I have a minivan that hauls all around. One of them is 4-wheel drive because I live in New England. My wife drives a lot to work, so we have an economical stick shift on a Mazda. And then we kept the old minivan because I have teenage drivers, and it's great. She starts shaking violently if she goes 70 miles an hour. it's big enough that if she gets hit, she will likely not be productive. And again, in my kitchen, all my appliances come from different suppliers. And I'm one of those people. I have an Android phone, a Mac laptop at home, and at work I have Windows desktops. Those are my choices. That's my best of breed. And again, there are lots of ways of saying the same thing. One size does not fit all. some people say if you have a hammer, then everything looks like a nail. But no, you want the right tool for the job. You want a screwdriver when you have to drive a screw, or a wrench when you're turning a bolt. And in the geospatial ecosystem that exists now. Take advantage of the new market possibilities. There's some things out there that are the jackknives that do a little bit of everything. And we all probably have jackknives, but we don't carve our steaks with a jackknife or take, the tweezers you might use if you're camping, but at home you use better tweezers if you have a splinter. Choose the best tool for the job, or at least examine what the best tool is. So how does this play out in reality for a real-world project? We recently completed a project for the Western Wetlands Association that ended up with a hybrid solution, because we looked at the problem and chose the best breed mix of things. So just a little background. It's called the Crucial Habitat Assessment Tool. The project was initiated with some stimulus funds given to the WGA in 2010. And for 2+ years, the states worked together to develop a model to show where is the most crucial habitats in the West, across a 17-state area. And each state got to determine that for their own state, and then they had to put it together to make it West-wide. And the result of the model is hexagons. You can see on the right-hand side of the screen. And the more blue the hexagon, the more crucial that habitat is. And so they really worked hard to get the data right, and then they wanted to publish the data and get those data into play, and so there was a data viewer. And we were fortunate enough to win the project to build that viewer. So what were the planning and design factors that sort of led us to the mix of technologies that I'll describe in a moment? First, technology was not part of their RFP. They just told you what kind of viewer they wanted and what it was supposed to do. They didn't say it had to be anything or couldn't be anything. The WGA doesn't have an in-house GIS shop. They don't have any software licenses. They don't have any servers. But the RFP required you to host it for 1 year and then be prepared to give it to them. When you launch something and the WGA and several of the governors have press releases about it, you can expect there will be lots of people in the first couple of days or weeks, and no one wants to be healthcare.gov version 2. Relatively simple geospatial capabilities, mostly about making the data available. But they worked really hard for 2 or 3 years. They wanted this to be a unique web destination. And it wasn't just a map, there's a whole website that describes the program and displays the metadata, which is very complicated because there's 17 different state sources to the Westwide data. And they wanted it to be high performance. There's a great quote again from Brian Kennedy's blog. If you publish it to the public, it needs to be 4 things. It needs to be fast, useful, easy, and fast. We're all impatient. It's a slow website, you're out of it. So what did we choose? We chose Boundless and the open source stack for managing the hexagon geometry on the server. We used GeoServer and GeoWebCache for making the tiles to help us keep the site really fast. We also used a really great tool, Arc2Earth, to help in tile making. How'd that happen? I was at the Minnesota GIS LAS conference. I was talking to Paul Wickman, who's here this week. I said, what do you guys use for tile? He's like, I'm doing some cool stuff with Arc2Earth. That's how it works. I'll check it out. We liked it. It was cheap. It works really well. So we used it. That's the best of breed world. So why? Open source tools. Arc2Earth is not open source, but it's low cost. Very high performance, especially when deployed in Amazon's cloud. And because there's no licensed software, when we want to give it to the WGA, they don't have to buy licenses. Literally, we can just transfer the Amazon bill to them. It's very seamless. So what do we use for our user interface? We chose the Google Maps API in our JavaScript framework. And we chose their base maps and their location clue because people are familiar with it. People know how to use Google. People like the simplicity. People know what the colors mean. People like that you can type in Yellowstone and it finds Yellowstone National Park. You don't have to type the whole thing in or an address. It's very flexible. The public's familiar with it. The location query is really strong. And while they have enterprise tools, if they're careful about their terms of service, which are liberal, it can be cost-free. And indeed, the way it being deployed for the WLIA is in that mode. And then Esri is part of Mix. I don't think Esri has anything to fear about best-of-breed output. They're the best-of-breed in a lot of things. And certainly one of them is data management and data aggregation, which was done again by the states and the University of Kansas. They all have the licenses. They all have the people with the know-how to do it. And that's how 1.4 million hexagons were assembled and standardized into a unified data set. And it worked great. So if you're curious, check it out. It's out there online. Here's our Google Analytics. You can see our launch spike here. Yep, a lot of people check it out the first couple of weeks. This is also right before Christmas and weekends show up. And it's coming along this month. About 100 people a day are checking it out. It's gotten some good press, some good reception. We were all surprised geoplatform.gov is highlighting it as their featured application. The mixing and matching works. These tools are here to mature and can be combined in useful ways. So to wrap it up, how do you make sense of it all? And I certainly don't have any silver bullet to it. This is kind of the way I look at it. As a timeline showed before, change happens. It's part of our world. We know it well. We had to go from ArcGIS 9 to ArcGIS 10, or from ArcGIS 3 to ArcGIS 4. It's there. And I don't think one size fits all. What do we want? We want tools, right tools to solve problems, and we also want tools that allow us to do unique things. Whether it's make it more beautiful or more friendly or an analysis that no one's ever tackled. So a lot of it is just being a good shopper and understanding what's available, realizing that this is a moment where things are being shaken up and be informed about it. And shameless plug for the talk I'm doing at 1:30 this afternoon on GIS planning. It's a great time to do planning. What are we going to be doing what's our roadmap for GIS development for the next 5 years? There's a lot to consider, and it's worth taking a structured look at that. And the other thing is opening your mind. These aren't questions of Esri or open source. It's about understanding what's available and choosing what works for you. In the battle days of the 80s and 90s, there were the CAD versus GIS wars, the raster versus vector wars. And what ended up happening is everyone realized you need both. They're different. So you want both. And I see new parallels with that. It's not desktop versus the cloud. You need both. It's not Esri versus anyone else. There's room for both. And there's best you may find your own calculus in that both options add value to your organization. So with that, I'll wrap it up. Happy to answer a couple questions if there's time. But I couldn't be more excited about what's going on in 2014. It's unique, it's interesting, and my answer is yes, we're having lots of fun. Thank you.